So our topic is tablets and special needs, and we have 3 presenters tonight. The first one will be me giving you a short overview over the topic. And then after that, Marco Iannacone from Italy will talk to you about the use of tablets for students which are dyslexic. And he developed his own tablet with special software for dyslexic students. And as our third speaker, we will have Sukan Mer from the University of Lancaster, who will tell us more about a small study she's currently carrying out on the benefits of tablets for visually impaired students. And to give you a little overview what I'm talking about, I will also switch on my camera so you can see me as well. And so at European SchoolNet, we were involved not only in the Creative Classrooms lab project, but also in a project that was called SENnet. And in this project, we talked especially about the benefits of tablets for students with special needs. And you find all the resources I talk about now also in our MOOC section 4.3 of our MOOC. So we conducted at the end of last year within that project a literature review on this topic, and also our partners in 8 different countries did case studies which show like how individual students can benefit from the use of tablets, and you can view all these videos also in our MOOC, as I said, in section 4.3. And what we did with the literature review was to get a general overview first, and I will only talk about the use of tablets in general, but in the literature review you will also find a mention of autistic children, students with attention deficits, dyslexic students, students with limited fine motor control, and also students with visual impairments as specific groups you could look at on that topic. And if you look at the evidence that is already there, you can see that there's quite some interest in the topic, but not a lot of rigorous research out there, so not a lot of big studies on the topic. And while I'm talking, please remember that you can always ask questions in the chat or tell us if you have problems listening to me or whatever, and we will reply to your questions. But nonetheless, there are a few studies already there, and one of them is a report that came out in 2013, the Tablets for School report, that looked at tablets in general, and mentioned as one of its most exciting findings, the potential that tablets can have for students with special needs, because it might, with the right app, provide them with the opportunity to do the same tasks as the rest of the class on the same device, and that is something that can be very rewarding for these students. Another study that looked at the topic was a study done by the Curtin University in Australia, and this university interviewed 12 teachers in the special needs field, and in general all those teachers were also very positive about the use of iPads in that case for students with special needs. And the main reason was that students find it very motivating, and that the iPads made it easier to personalize the teaching for these children. And something that the study did not find but suggests might be there as some potential is that tablets might also help to actually improve the achievement of these students, because it motivates them to have the possibility to use an iPad, and it also enables us to personalize the learning. 2 other studies look more specifically at the first one at autistic children. The Kennedy Krieger Institute looked at autistic children and also recommended that iPads or tablets in general have the potential to enhance their learning and independence. And the last study is a study from the Lancaster University, and this study Sukan Mer will present herself in a moment. So what you can say is that there are first promising results in research, but there's still a lack of bigger studies, and in particular there's an issue with a small size of samples usually. So for example, the Curtin University study I was talking about only talked to 12 teachers, and the same is true for studies with students, so it's difficult, especially with such a heterogeneous group like students with special needs. You know, they're all very different. It's difficult to learn from the results of one small study for the whole group. And as a next, I will talk a little bit about the benefits that the already existing research suggests. And we're first starting to remind you of the general benefits of tablets in education. So that's something we have been talking in our MOOC course already. Its advantages like the simple interface, the portability like the mobile character, and the speed of tablets, which make them interesting for education, and the variety of apps, as you know. And together with all these features, the tablets allow for an easy access to learning opportunities, information, organizational systems, communication, and also emotional support. And as such, the tablet becomes a tool to enhance teaching and learning potentially. But tablets can also be interesting as an assistive technology, and specifically, and also for the same reasons, because they're mobile and because they allow for different activities. And what is interesting for students with special needs is also that other students also use the tablets, so it does not make them stand out. Because, for example, if they use a specific assistive device like a traditional communication board, then that would make them stand out more than a tablet does. On top of that, tablets offer different accessibility features already built in. You can find examples of that on the screen, and therefore they are sometimes able to replace assistive technologies. So, for example, a student can, instead of using a traditional communication board, can use a tablet with a communication board app and can bring it anywhere he needs it. And the last point is that tablets and the apps are less expensive than traditional assistive technology, which can at times be very expensive, and therefore they are easier to replace also if they break or get lost. What is interesting about the tablet in particular? One thing which is very interesting for some students with special needs is the touch screen, which means you can touch the screen and get an immediate feedback because the color changes or you get a sound. And that is very engaging for some students who might get otherwise more easily bored, which is very engaging to them, and which also includes an element of tactile learning by touching something. The second thing is that tablets, of course, as you know, allow for very individualized use, personalized use of the app, of the tablet, for more personalized learning. And finally, they also support the move to cloud-based and web-based software, and that can be helpful to some students that in the past maybe had a special educational software on a specific device in their school and then couldn't use the same device or the same program still at home. And as my last point, I would like to point out some particular benefits. As I said already, as tablets are very motivating for students in general, they are also for some students with special needs. Sometimes they would perform a task on a tablet which otherwise they would not have done on a paper, for example, the case for some autistic children. Then what I've already mentioned, it is more easy to personalize the student's learning with a tablet because it's easier to individualize the instruction, to track the progress, and to change and customize the content. And this enables alternative ways of providing learning to the students. And the last point, which is very important, is I call it here inclusivity, and I've mentioned it briefly before. Tablets enable the students not to stand out anymore, students with special needs, in particular in a setting where all students have a tablet, then they don't feel like it's only them using a device, and in that sense, tablets are also cooler. This is the last point of my introduction, and if you have any questions from the chat, then let me know. My colleague Elena was following the chat during my presentation. Otherwise, if there are no questions, like, you still have the possibility to ask me a question right now. Otherwise, I will switch over now to Marco and his presentation. Marco, can you try to speak?
Hello, can you hear me?
Perfect. And you should now be able to, like, we see your presentation now, and you should be able to also move the slides now.
Okay, yes, I see them now. Okay, so thank you everyone for hosting me in this webinar. So I'm Marco Iannacone, I'm a software engineer, and I will talk about our experience of testing and using tablets to support kids with specific learning disabilities in general. Okay, so I'm the founder of a startup that produces EdiTouch, which is a software suite for simplified learning that leverages the capability of modern tablets and support the student with special education needs. Let me try to switch on my camera so you can see me. I hope you see me now. So we develop our solution ground up, thinking and believing that was important to implement just the features that are required to students, so that they are not distracted by any other feature not required, and also to keep simpler the user interface and the application usage. So what I will discuss with you in the next 10-15 minutes are the results from our trial, which was a 2 years long scientific trial between 2012 and 2014, with more than 400 students in Italy. It is one of the widest research in Europe to assess scientifically the effectiveness of a digital solution to support students with dyslexia. The outcome of our research, it is available. You will see that you have the link here in the presentation, has been also included in the Innovation 2014 report from SENnet. And basically, it is saying that our tablets favored a greater capacity in terms of academic results, and also improved higher self-esteem, autonomy, and motivation in kids who were using our tablets at school and at home for all their studying activities. So we have experience. We are talking about students with specific learning disabilities, so students with an IQ which is in general average or higher than average, because this is the definition of dyslexia. And we involved students in two base age groups. The first one was attending the Italian primary school, which is up to 11 years old, and the second group was attending the Italian secondary school up to 14 years old. And we worked to support those kids in reading and writing activities, in making calculations, and in general in the memorization and studying of topics. What we found, why we started experimenting a tablet to support dyslexic child, what was not working in existing tools. As you probably know, there are hundreds there are different applications for PC and compensatory tools on PC, but generally, especially the youngest, find those quite complex to use. Also, the usage of the computer in class sometimes is rejected by the child, as Katia was mentioning, because it contributes to make them feel different than their schoolmates. Also, it might be a source of distraction because computers are quite complex tools with many applications and features, and so don't have kids to concentrate on their activity. I don't know if it applies also in Europe, but in Italy, some teachers are not very familiar with PC, and so they are not very good in supporting kids in case they find difficulties with those devices. And even if they are competent in using them, sometimes they don't feel that this is part of their teaching role. Another aspect is that PCs are in general not optimized for readability, so fonts and text-to-speech libraries by default are not very good. And as Katia mentioned, they are also quite expensive. In general, if we are not able to support kids in studying activity, this give a higher risk of loss of self-esteem, and therefore impact on the potential subsequent educational level achieved by the students. So what we provided in our software suite, a nice modern user interface. You see here with big icons our interface for primary school, quite simple to use by students, and able to focus their attention on individual apps that are useful for them for the studying activity. Additionally, we have a control mechanism for teacher to select just the individual app that the kids need to use according to their neurodiversity or to their level of development that they have. We provided training for teachers and for parents before and during the trial activity, and our tablet had already pre-installed high readability fonts. Here we have some example of high readability fonts optimized for reading, and also high quality text-to-speech libraries. Finally, we have developed and we have a selection of applications coming with the tablet, we will see later, helping them in the key areas. Okay, what we found, one of the findings that we had, it is that the size and the kind of device is important to kids. So in our experimentation, we found out that we need to provide kids with big tablets. So generally 9.5 or bigger devices. Also, the operating system, especially for the older one, the one in the second cluster, the secondary school in Italy, is very important. Those kids are already familiar with, sometimes are already familiar with the operating system that they find on the mobile phone that they have, such as Android or iOS, and they believe they feel those operating system as modern, while they see Windows, at least the one that attended our trial, as something for older people. So it's not modern. So they like very much to have something similar to the device that they see in their parents' hands or in their own hands as handsets. And also, it is very important to give them quality devices. I mean, they easily understand when you give them, cheap devices, they kind of dislike them quite soon. So it's important the form factor, is important the quality of the device, the performance of the device itself, and the size of it. As I mentioned before, it's very important the training for the success of such a trial. This because not very much for kids, because kids are used to learn by doing. By nature, they experiment themselves things. It is important the training for teachers, because they are the one who need to drive the usage and adoption in the classroom of the tablets. And also because some of them, in our trial, we found out that some of them had some psychological resistance in the adoption of the tablet. They had the feeling before the training, before really testing how the device worked, they had the feeling that they were not able to govern, to make use of those things. And honestly, after a couple of sessions of training, the most of them came to us saying, I didn't believe it was so easy. So it's key to get the buy-in and to train them properly. Also because the tablets are just tools. I mean, they need to make them the tool to provide personalized lessons according to their education model. I mean, they need to own the device, to know the device. And also, support at home is very important, especially for younger kids. The primary school ones are often followed at home by parents to do the homework. So it's important to train them also so that they can follow the kids and use the same methodology at home, the same one that is used in schools. It is also for parents was not required to perform huge number of session of training. It was enough for us, it was enough to run 3 sessions of training during the first 3-4 months, and they were fine with it. Another suggestion that I want to give is that teachers need to prepare digital lessons for tablet. It's not enough to transpose, pictures on the tablet, but in order to make the device useful, please try to leverage the technology that you have and make your lessons interactive. Use videos and animation. Try to use gamification to involve kids. And of course, very important for kids with specific learning disability, but in general for every kid, provide concept maps to ease the understanding of topics by students. this is something that we found out during our experimentation. It's not a holy war between digital and analog. Sometimes our kids were using our tablets on top of the analog, on the standard, the traditional books, and they were using both of them. They don't see a huge distinction, especially the youngest one, between one device and another, one tool and another. They see, of course, that they have differences and different capabilities, but for them, it's not, either we go totally digital or totally analog, but you can combine the two things together. Then, of course, it's very important the application, the apps that you use. Apps really make the difference to support dyslexic child. So what we provided in our tablet is a reading, an ebook reader able to read aloud school books with good text-to-speech and karaoke functionalities. We provided a homework diary where students talking, a diary that can talk to kids, so they can keep track of their homework on a diary, and the diary can read aloud what they had to do. Also, we provided a talking keyboard on our device. Our device has this talking keyboard, which is standard, and you can benefit of it on every application. Of course, it has embedded spec shell and auto-suggestion, and also read aloud every word that you write. Then we have talking calculators for dyscalculic, and we have, of course, a concept map tool that you can see in this picture. We have also an office suite that can read aloud what the kids are using. We have vocabulary and so on. You have here some of the screenshots of our applications. A couple of additional suggestions that I can make. To you, control is key, especially for older kids. So, as you know better than me, teenagers very quickly learn how to use the device, and they become very competent, quite often more competent than the teachers themselves. So they sort out the way of cheating, playing games, chatting, and so on. And once they find out how to do that, it's impossible for them to resist. So we provided on our tablets some control mechanism that can, by which the teacher can limit the student activity. For example, the teacher with a single tap, they can lock every tablet and every device in the classroom, and with a message saying, eyes on the whiteboard, because in that moment students can't, I need to follow, I don't need to use the tablet. They can limit the application, teacher can limit the application the students can use, can see what the students are doing by, remotely looking at their screen, so they know if they are using one application or the other, and so they have full control of the activity that the students do at school. So this particular application is provided, as said, to school, and we found out that it's very beneficial for older kids. Another aspect is the monitoring of the activity the students do. Teenagers, seek for whatever information on the internet, and sometimes, can find, content that are not appropriate for their age, or even not appropriate for the school. So, again, we provided some control mechanism that can monitor the activity of the students online, and then can prevent access to certain content, and also can give statistics of how the students spend their time with the tablet. You can see here a screenshot of the activity that this particular student did. And of course, it's a third party. In this case, it's a third-party product. It's not our product, but it's very good. It's monitoring everything and can give also the parents the possibility to, have an eye on some activity that are risky for students. For example, can prevent or monitor cyberbullying. Talking with foreigner and so on, because it is showing what are doesn't show the content of the conversation that the student do, but they monitor that they show exactly what are the number of the person that they talk more with, or they send SMS with, or the one on Facebook and so on. So that was a very good addition. Finally, one advice that I would like to give, it is to adopt a competency-based evaluation. Of course, you know what is competency-based education and evaluation. I believe that this is very important also with kids with special learning disability, because rather than evaluating them on standard, knowledge on the common cores and so on, you evaluate them on the skills they acquired in a specific period of time. So this approach is very good also because can provide individualized learning to students, and it is student-centered, and you can work on different things on different students. In order to achieve that, of course, you need to identify specific skills and competencies, in your area, apply those and customize those for each individual student, and then, during the year, assess the starting level and the achieved level of the student over time. Finally, last point, it is that we found out that once we reactivated the interest for learning for those kids. Sorry, maybe I need to go back a bit. Sometimes kids with specific learning disability, if they have not been properly encouraged and supported in past, they lose interest in learning because they believe that because they don't want to measure themselves in those things and try to reject those, not to enter in the competition, not to show that those things are difficult for them. So by the adoption of tools that simplify their learning, such as the tablets that we provided, we find out that we get a hook, a way to regain their trust. So EduTouch, our software, played a role as a cultural mediator, and attracting them to knowledge. And once we got trust from them, in the possibility for school to teach them things that they are interested in, we could, involve them in other activity, for example, in coding, and we are trying to use in some classroom App Inventor, which is similar to Scratch, but allows you to develop application for tablets. We used, of course, 3D printers. We use, we encourage the maker aptitudes with, Little Bit, for example, with the Makey Little Bit, and those tools that allow you to create the first application. Of course, you can use, you can involve kids in robotics, and we used also MIDI keyboard connected to our tablets and MIDI synthesis software to involve them more in music and creativity and so on. That was basically it. Here you have some of the links to our website. And of course, we are looking to improve and enhance much more our software. We are looking to perform other trials in other countries, in Europe in general. So if you are interested in being involved in those trials, here you find my email address, so contact me because it will be a pleasure for us to work with you.
Thank you very much, Marco. I didn't see any specific questions in the chat yet, but maybe you can stay in the chat, and if there are still questions.
Okay.
Then you can just answer them in the chat, and I will already make Sue a presenter now.
Okay, sure, thanks.
Marco, I see some questions for you in the chat, so maybe you can just reply in the chat.
Okay, I will reply in the chat then. Okay, thank you.
And Sue, can you try to speak?
Hello, Katju, can you hear me?
Perfect. And you're the presenter now, so you should be able to move your slides as well. So just start whenever you're ready.
Okay. Would you like to do Marco's questions first, or should I go ahead?
Just go ahead. It's fine because.
Okay. I'll just wait for the slides.
You should already be be able to see them and move them.
No, I'm looking at Marco's last slide.
But do you see on the top that there's other presentations available as well?
Ah.
It should be yours as well.
Okay.
That's mine. And then it's the one which is called MOOC-May. So if you click on that one, that will be yours.
Oh, I did click on it, but there we are.
Exactly. Now you're where you want to be.
Can you tell I've not done this before? So, hello everyone. I will just put on my camera for a minute just to say hello and so that you can see me. Oh, there we go. Just so that you get some idea of who's speaking to you this afternoon. And thank you very much for the invitation, Katja, and it's very interesting to hear the study, Marco. Okay, I'm going to turn off the video now, so that because I don't have great bandwidth here, so I want to make sure that the presentation runs okay. Okay, so tablets for visually impaired students, early findings from a UK study. I should say that I've actually spent the last 16 or 17 years looking at how young people use digital technologies, and particularly the internet, which of course has changed over that time, and particularly the recent move to tablets and so on. And I will just move on the next slide, if I remember how. Oh, yes. Okay. So I'm going to talk about the project I've been doing in the background and student and teacher views on tablets for learning for visually impaired young people, and then offer some tentative conclusions. I'm just writing up the report for this study, so it's still very much ongoing. Okay. Whilst I've been studying how young people use technology over a number of years, it's been very noticeable how little research has looked at how children with impairments use technology. And although there's a huge amount of support in UK schools, and I think that's probably the same for practitioners in other countries, there's really not very much research for outsiders to look at and see how that works. So with this in mind, I started looking at this, and I managed to get funding to carry out a small-scale pilot study about how young people with visual impairments in mainstream schools, so not in special schools, but in mainstream schools, use digital technologies such as the computer and the internet for learning. I think this is important, as I'm sure you do, that these young people get the same opportunities as their peers and their classmates for all the things that young people can do with technology, such as learning, leisure and work. And also that they get the digital skills and competences they need for their education at the moment and also later for work, and so that they can do everything else they want to safely and avoid risk. Okay, so this is the project so far. It's a pilot project. So what you're doing with a pilot project, of course, is getting some idea of what you need to look at. And then I will put a bid in to, for larger funding so that I can actually look at this much more closely. So this is very small at the moment. Having said that, I've actually conducted interviews with students, teachers and support teams and carried out observations in the classroom, which is really useful for getting a very close, in-depth view of how young people are using technology who have visual impairments. So far I've spoken to 7 young people at secondary level. That's around age 11 onwards, and 1 at primary school, so 1 younger child. And 3 qualified teachers. In the UK, we have a system where regionally we have qualified teachers of visual impairment and 4 teaching assistants, and these are the people who support directly the young people that I've spoken to, and 4 classroom teachers for the classes which those young people are in. And I'm going to talk here about secondary schools because that's where I've done most of the interviews. And I'm also going to focus on what's happening in school. I am interested in what they do outside school, but within 10 minutes I thought it was better just to home in on a couple of things, really. Now, just to make sure we're talking about the same thing, in the schools, what I've come across are HP Envies, iPads and iPod Touches. So HP Envies are, you can see from this picture here on the left-hand side of the screen, an HP Envy looks like a laptop, but it's actually a tablet at the top of the screen and a detachable keyboard, so it can function as both a Windows laptop, but also as a separate tablet. And actually there's a lot in common between how people are using iPads and how they're using HP Envies. And there's also an iPod Touch in the bottom of the screen, which you might be more familiar with. And this is an overview of the kind of examples that young people have told me about that they like to use tablets for their learning. And the first of these is so that they can be sent documents and presentations before lessons, so that they can get things in advance. And I'll talk a bit more about this on the next slide. But the reason this matters is it means that they can modify the presentations they sent before the class, and that means that they can go at the same speed as the other students in the classroom. So it's actually very important that they get these things in advance. And the HP Envy actually functions the same way, so documents are installed before lessons rather than being emailed. The students I've spoken to have been using iBooks, which they can use and access using the accessible settings on the tablets. And in the UK, we also have something called Load to Learn, where a lot of resources are put online for students with visual impairment. Some of the students I've talked to like to watch videos on YouTube. They like to use apps to create short films, to compose music. And there are some signs of collaborative projects using things like Dropbox to share presentations. So I think these are quite similar to what most young people do, actually. I don't think there's any great difference here. But I think the difference is that the tablets are allowing them to... there's a very interesting question just come up there. I'll answer questions at the end because that's really interesting. Okay, so where was I? Yeah, so pretty much the same things, but the accessibility allows young people to do things at the same time and space as other young people. The HP Envy is very similar, and one of the big differences here is about the organisation, because whereas in the schools, iPads are often, in the schools that I've visited, they're allowed to take iPads home, then HPMVs are often just kept in school. And that makes a big difference in terms of personalisation, because the young people cannot put their own material on there and they have much less of a sense of ownership. Now, these are the benefits that the young people I've been speaking to have told me about. And in terms of things like the iPad, they really like the fact that they can zoom them, so they can zoom them very simply, or they can actually just bring them closer to their eyes. So if you imagine that a presentation is sent by email to a student before a class, then when the teacher puts it on the board, the young person can bring it closer to their eyes or to zoom it, and they're working in the same space as their peers. It avoids carrying large textbooks. It's more reliable than a laptop with magnification, which is what a lot of these students were using prior to having iPads and HPMVs. It's lighter than carrying a laptop. It's quicker to start up. Internet more fun than a textbook, more interactive. They like the touch screen. It's easier to use than a mouse. They can take photos, zoom in, change colours, so they're able to modify on tablets very easily to their own specifications and preferences. For some students, it connects home and school, and they can see what's written on screen through enlarging letters and so on. And very similar with the HPMV, although it works slightly differently. So one of the things they do like is the magnification window. And again, they like to take a photo with the detachable tablet to see what's on the board. If I show you the magnification window, you've probably seen this before. But whereas with laptops and magnification, often what someone has to do was move around a huge screen and kind of, how do you explain it? Home in on something small, which meant it was quite difficult to manipulate on the screen. Whereas if you have an enlargement window, it's much easier to use. And the students talked to me about how much more independent they feel. I think Marco picked up on some of this, as did Katya in her presentation. It's really important that you can get on your own and you can access content, take notes autonomously, organise yourself, do all these things that we want learners to do. Seem to be much more possible on a tablet because of the reasons we've talked about, which is it's quicker, it's more seamless, they can modify it themselves much more easily. It also reduces stigma, and I'll read this out because I like this quote. One of the young people said to me, "I feel just like an ordinary person when I'm using it. I like to be a tiny bit different, but I don't like to be so much different that everyone treats me differently. I like to be just like a normal girl sort of thing in the mix," which I quite like. And having an iPad, and my friends have iPads as well, it just makes me feel like one of them, basically. Clearly very important when you're a teenager fitting in. Probably important at most ages, but that would be a different study. Okay, student views. There are some issues though, technical problems. I'm sure as teachers who use technology in classrooms, you're very familiar with the websites not loading and issues like that. When I saw this in a classroom, what happened was the teaching assistant actually intervened and helped out. So it does seem like in some situations you can't rely totally on the technology, but you need a person still on hand to help out when the technology doesn't work. One student using an HPMV said that she still felt different using it, and that was because she wasn't in a classroom where other young people were using technology particularly. So she was still different, whereas in the school with iPads, often other children had iPads. Issues with extended piece of writing on the iPad. Quite difficult to write with a touch screen, of course, and some students were more or less familiar with attaching keypads to them, keyboards, whereas of course the HPMV came with one, and some documents were too large to email. A number of young people said to me that they weren't familiar with using the cloud, and they found the cloud quite difficult as a means of getting things onto their iPads. Okay, and the other thing was teachers slightly lagging behind where the students were. So some teachers preferred to continue to prepare and to enlarge worksheets, which still carries quite a lot of stigma for young people. Some teachers are not happy to email PowerPoint presentations in advance. I presume that's when they're very time restricted and they're working very much as they walk into the classroom, or they simply don't want people to have access beforehand. One teacher preferred to provide materials on a memory stick rather than emailing beforehand, which meant that this student had to carry both laptop and iPad to school every day, which was cumbersome. Okay, I also spoke to teachers, and these were classroom teachers and teaching assistants. They all had very good things to say about tablets, about them being quicker and lighter, easier for manipulating and modifying documents, which, as we said, can make young people much more independent. They have street cred. A lot of young people talked about them being cool, as did teachers. And just as a cost effective, whilst iPads are quite expensive, they're not so bad if compared with laptops and magnification and large key calculators, the teachers said. And what I've tried to do to bring us more close to look more in depth was actually look at an interview I did with a language teacher, and to try and look at more specifically the advantages he was seeing. Now, the school have had iPads for this particular class, and they're going to, they're rolling iPads out across the whole school, but they've started with the new intake of 12 to 13-year-old children. So they all have an iPad in that class. And he said that generally, not just for visually impaired children, tablets were useful for any students particularly who resist traditional methods. And he found that he could readily integrate them into collaborative learning. This teacher builds most of his teaching around the idea of collaboration, which, being a language teacher, is perhaps not surprising. So the students are always sat in groups, and they move groups every few weeks. And he found that the iPad was particularly easy to integrate into that. He designs all activities to be inclusive for the student with visual impairment. So he's actually removed a lot of the visual parts of his usual teaching methods so that the student can access this. And he said that this was much better for the student involved, because previously the magnification on the laptop was a nightmare and the student ended up very frustrated. And he also mentioned that he's finding benefits in a different class for a student who has dyslexia. I'm just looking at the time, so I need to speed up. This is sock puppets, which he was using so that young people could write phrases in French, which then get spoken by this app. This was very popular with the children I watched. And these issues are actually very similar to the ones that the young people said. Okay. So it was issues like not everything being available electronically, not everything is of adequate quality, teachers don't anticipate well what a student can access, and sometimes subject teachers think it's not part of their role. So even though tablets may help, as always, a lot of this comes back to what teachers are able to do themselves. Okay. So very quickly, students and teachers are very, very positive about use of tablets for teaching and learning, particularly to enable young people with visual impairments to participate in mainstream classrooms, to nurture independence and to reduce stigma. But some barriers remain, and they're both technical and relating to teacher practices, time, skill, experience, and those kinds of things. Okay, I should stop there, particularly looking at the time, and hand back to Katja. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much. So very interesting. And I have one question for you from Carmen, and maybe you can answer that question, and then we will conclude our webinar and let everybody have a nice evening. The question is, Carmen has the impression that laptops are more useful for adults, while students prefer tablets. And do you think that's the case, and what could that depend on?
That's a very interesting question. In this study, because I was looking specifically at visual impairment, I only asked the teachers about how they would support the young people they taught with tablets. So the comments very much relate to the fact that they saw advantages of the young people using tablets. How they find, I think the question is implying are laptops more appreciated
in terms of
adults using. Is that right?
That adults, for the things they want to use a laptop for, find a laptop more.
Yeah, possibly. But I think they appreciate that the young people actually find the tablets much easier. I've actually done a different study, which is kind of different. I've done a study in higher education with students looking at the benefits and disadvantages of using tablets. And actually there, it seems to be specific tasks. So if you're writing a long piece of work, you want a laptop with a proper keyboard. If you're actually trying to look things up and look for information when you're out and about, then it's much more easy to use a phone or a tablet. So actually, I think there are links between the activity you're doing and which technology it is. Does that make sense?
Yes, and I have one more question maybe for you, a last one, and it's about the need that it's a question from a teacher from Spain, the need to pass external evaluation exams to go to university. So how do you combine the need to pass these traditional written exams with your idea to also combine modern technologies in your teaching?
Yeah, I think it's a very, very difficult area, and the asker of that question is right to flag it up. At the moment, I believe some exam boards only allow a laptop with magnification to be taken into an exam, whereas the students find it easier, obviously, to use a tablet. So I think that's a bit of a problem at the moment. But it's certainly an area that I want to look at more when I get funding to do a further project.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Katja.
Thank you for all your contributions. And yeah, you will find, as I said, all the materials back on our MOOC in section 3.4. And I wish all of you a nice evening and see you back on our MOOC course. Bye-bye.